Did you see the aggressive incident that took place in the Middlesbrough-Rotherham game the other day?
Indeed I did. That challenge was in fact very aggressive and an unnecessary challenge from the Rotherham player, as there was clear intent to harm the player in the challenge that was made. This therefore makes this tackle aggression as opposed to just a bad tackle. The intent to hurt a particular person, either verbally or physically, will classify if a tackle or act was aggression or not. In this particular case of the challenge you are referring to, this would be aggression, as no attempt for the ball was made. These particular types of behaviours can be seen often in sport, and can be caused by a number of different factors that contribute to make up reasons why a player may commit an aggressive tackle or say something aggressive on the pitch or during a sporting game. These types of behaviours we see in all sports can be misperceived as the wrong thing from time to time. However, in this particular case, the word aggression is correctly used, and this tackle was clearly made with the intent to cause harm to another player, and therefore this is classified as aggression.
Therefore, in relation to the first question, what would you define aggression as in sports?
Aggression is commonly misused in sports due to the fact that people seem to lack the knowledge of what differentiates this aggression from other ways of behaving, such as just simply being frustrated or angry. There is a key factor to every definition of aggression, and that is simply an act that is aggressive is performed with the intent to either physically or mentally hurt another person deliberately. In 1990, Ball defined aggression as any behaviour that is intended to harm another individual by physical or verbal means. This means that in terms of the tackle that took place in the Middlesbrough-Rotherham game, this challenge had clear malicious intent to harm the other player, which is the core reason as to why this particular challenge would be classified as aggression as opposed to just frustration or anger or any other behaviour along these lines. Furthermore, this definition was then developed in 1994 by Barron and Richardson, who defined aggression as any form of behaviour directed towards the goal of harming or injuring another live being who is motivated to avoid such treatment. This definition also includes the core of aggression having to be performed deliberately to harm someone in a physical or verbal way in order to be classed as aggression and not something else. The definition, however, differs slightly due to the fact that this adds the point that this has to be inflicted on a person who does not want this to happen to them. For example, this further reinforces the clarification that the challenge made in this game discussed was aggression and cannot be mistaken for anger, as the player on the other end of the tackle would not have wanted this to happen to them, therefore emphasising the fact that this incident was an act of aggression according to how we define aggression. A key theorist in terms of defining aggression would be Gills, who in 1986 determined 4 criteria as to what aggression is or is not. These 4 points consist of physical or verbal behaviour, causes harm or injury, directed to another living human being, and finally, intentional. These 4 factors make up Gill's criteria devised to define aggression and differentiate an act that could be aggression from an act that was anger or maybe frustration. For example, if on a football pitch a player deliberately fouled another player in order to harm that player, this would be classified as aggression, like the example discussed previously. However, if a person in a football game accidentally committed a bad challenge that caused harm on another player, although this would be commonly referred to as aggression, this does not meet the criteria and therefore would not be classified as an aggressive tackle by definition. Therefore, this aggression can be defined and does have criteria in order to help determine whether an act is classified as aggression or something else. This is due to the fact that many key theorists have stated this must be intentional and performed on another human to physically or verbally cause harm in order to classify as aggression and not something else by definition.
Can there be different types of aggression inside aggression itself? If so, what are these, and how would these apply to, say, the roles of a coach or experience of players?
Yes, there can be different forms and types within aggression that can apply to different sporting examples. Firstly, the first type of aggression I'm going to discuss is known as hostile aggression. This was defined as in 1910 by Todd, Thatcher and Rahman. Harmful intent without the desire to achieve a competitive benefit. This would mean, in terms of sport, this could be a rugby player performing a tackle purely with the intent to hurt the opposing player without the motivation of this challenge being related to winning or benefiting the team. This particular type of aggression, therefore, consists of harming this opposing player without the attention to benefit a goal or anything positive for their team, and purely with the intention to cause harm to the other player. Motives for this particular type of aggression include things such as to harm an opponent for its own sake, not for competitive benefit, and to inflict injury. In addition, this particular type of aggression is performed not in the rules of the game and therefore will result in a free kick or some kind of possession awarded to the other team. This is another key factor that differs this type of aggression from others, as this is performed with the intent to hurt a person, not within the rules of the game. This type of aggression can be a form of reactive aggression, caused by a reaction to another event or situation that had taken place earlier in the game. The next type of aggression is known as instrumental aggression. This is defined by Todd, Thatcher and Rahman in 2010 as being aggression which holds focus on completing a competitive goal through harmful means. This means that this particular type of aggression refers to an aggressive act or behaviour intended to achieve a goal. This therefore opposes hostile aggression, previously discussed, as hostile aggression is the intent to harm without completing a goal or gaining something positive in relation to the sport. This instrumental aggression is used as a means of securing a reward or victory. In terms of sport, this would be evident if a player fouled an opposing player in a football game who was clearly about to score in order to stop the player scoring and then therefore secure a win or a better result for his team. This would therefore be an example of instrumental aggression, as this would have been performed with the intent of harming the player and would be a challenge made that is not allowed in the rules of the game. However, this would have been done in order to achieve something such as victory or reward for their team, and this is what makes this an example of instrumental aggression. In addition to this type of aggression is aggressive behaviour in the pursuit of non-aggressive goals such as a reward or win. This will be performed in a calculated way with the intent to harm another player in order to achieve a goal or reward, and will be performed as an act, not in the rules of the game. Another type of aggression is known as assertion. Assertion can also be known as challenged aggression. This is defined by Bredemir in 1994 as assertive behaviour can improve performance and is where a player will play within the rules of the sport at a very high intensity, but will have no intention to harm an opponent. This means that this particular type of aggression is performed with no intention to harm. This means that this particular type of aggression is performed within the rules of the game, and therefore, in contrast to the previously discussed types of aggression, is done in a way with no intention to harm the opponent. This will often include robust and legitimate forceful actions in order to complete the skill necessary. This therefore, in terms of a sport, would be evident when a footballer performs a slide tackle and takes the player out, however plays the full ball first, and therefore performs this within the rules of the game and with no intended hurt aimed towards the player. This particular form of aggression therefore requires a large degree of self-control, as this is not easy to perform and requires maximal amounts of effort in order to assert this dominance and produce these particular types of tackles while also playing within the rules of the game and with no intent to harm. The nature of the sport is also relevant when talking about aggression and these different types of aggression. Wiggins-James in 2006 stated that it is important to realise the acts of aggression may be interrupted differently depending on the nature of the sport. This means that different sports may have different characteristics and natures that help to make them up, and therefore an act that may seem aggressive in one sport may just be a commonly performed act in another. For example, a sport such as rugby consists of lots of powerful and high impact collisions, whereas a sport such as netball may vary to this, as this is not a common occurrence in this sport. This means that in terms of the nature of these two sports, they differ quite dramatically. This point further leads to discuss another form of aggression known as sanctioned aggression. This is where a person performs an act with intent to harm another individual. However, this is performed within the rules of the sport. For example, this would be relevant in boxing, where punching your opponent with the intent to harm would be considered sanctioned aggression, as this is within the rules of the sport. However, if a person was to punch a player in a football game, this would not be within the rules and would result in a heavy long-term ban. This therefore shows how certain natures of different sports can vary. This, in terms of both coaches and players, can cause some confusion in what coaches say to their players in comparison to what they actually mean. For example, as stated by Colony in 1988, coaches will often ask their players to show aggression on the field. However, as previously mentioned, this term is often misused and not fully understood. This is due to the fact that showing types of aggression such as hostile and instrumental is discouraged at all levels of competition, as these are against the rules. Most of the time, what coaches actually mean is that they want their players to show assertion or assertive behaviour, which involves acting within the rules of the game. These different types of aggression in terms of athletes or performers see differences in certain types of performers. For example, Colomb and Pfister in 1998 conducted a study looking at aggression in high-level sport. They found that experienced athletes used more instrumental aggression, in which they used to their advantage, and that hostile aggression was less frequently used. This shows that more experienced athletes will show a greater use of self-control when performing this aggression, and perform in this way more often to benefit them or their team. This shows that aggression can be used in sport despite being against the rules, and can be effective for top performers to use. In addition to this, athletes and performers also use assertion in order to benefit performance, and this will often be encouraged in sport, as this is used within the rules and could also increase the success of a player or a team.